Hi, my name is Warbass. You're currently looking at what I refer to as my B case. It's a 7U 104 HP case made by Black Hole Cases out of Ohio. I made a couple of videos on this case before as I'm kind of working on the module selections and trying out a couple different things. If you haven't seen any of those, that's totally fine. This video is meant to be kind of from the ground up, patch from scratch. We're going to talk about every module. We're going to patch it up live, play with it for a little bit, and do kind of a complete walkthrough, similar to the first video I ever actually kind of spoke in on this channel about my A case, which is just next door to this one. One of the philosophies that I have going into both of these cases, or design goals maybe is a better word, is to have them both function independently and capable of doing everything I need to do for what they're supposed to do, independently from one another, but also play nice together. So they have very, very different purposes. This one's very drum focused, very heavy distortion. It's going to clip constantly and squeal and be angry. And that's the point. And meanwhile, that one over there is about audio sampling and mingling and ambience and kind of taking an audio sample and turning it into something else. This is not that at all. There is no sample component to this whatsoever, but it does have its own headphone out, which I don't use that much because I often will patch this into a more thorough end of chain that I have in my A case, which is really why it's called the A case, because it has the main kind of end of chain setup for my entire setup here, where I record everything in the case to SD card on a little 4MS wave recorder. But I digress. We're here to talk about this case today. So what are we looking at? Well, from just top left and over, we've got the Polygogo stereo oscillator, Mass, a little buffered mult from Patching Panda, a stereo filter from Chaos, the Zagreb, 200 grits from Slappy Engineering, Qubit Nautilus. And then in the 1U row, we've got a little USB port, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Their IntelliGel crossfader, or X-Fade, or something, whatever it's called. Two of the dual VCAs, also from IntelliGel. Endorphin's Cockpit 1U that I've actually modified. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I have a video on that, which I'll link up there. Endorphin's Golden Master, IntelliGel headphone out, and then in the bottom row, the Synth's Black Joystick 2, Lapsus Sauce from Noise Engineering, Clank Chaos, the Synth's LXR, or Elixir as I like to say, and then the sample drum, or not sample drum, what am I saying? Drum sequencer. I used to have a sample drum and I sold it, so I constantly say that word. That's kind of the lay of the land here. The way this typically patches, things usually start in the drum sequencer as kind of the home base. It then patches everything in the LXR. All of the audio signals from the LXR come up into the cockpit, which are joined by the Polygogo's stereo chain, which usually goes through a VCA, powered by a maths envelope, and then through the stereo filter here, coming into the cockpit in this fourth channel, which I'll patch up in a second. These two modules are linked behind with a little 3-pin cable. So all of audio from cockpit is automatically into the Golden Master, and then usually come out of the Golden Master through the 100 grits, the Nautilus, and away we go. So let's set up that kind of init patch and talk while we do it. I say we in a lot of these videos. I've noticed as I've watched myself talk on camera more lately than I ever have before. I'm just going to live with it. So one of the things I'll do right away when I patch this case up, and I do unpatch it completely, even though I set up the init patch fairly similarly each time. I will not leave it patched for very long. I'll take the whole patch down and leave it empty until it's like the next time that I'm gonna use it for something. So one of the first things I do is just take the first 7 outs, or the trigger outs from the drum sequencer, which let's power this thing on, and bring them over into the trigger ins for each of the 7 elements on the LXR. So there's 7 different components here. I'm sure there's way more trigger outs on this end. And there's also accents as well, but I really just use the first 7 here, starting with kick, the others kind of drum 2 and 3, snare clap, closed hat, hi-hat. And that's kind of my home base for this hand, knowing where those different drum elements are really easily and being able to toggle them off really easily. One of the things that I don't do, which is probably because I think there's either a bug or some unintended pattern that just doesn't make sense to me, is really patch these accents. Every time I've tried to do the accents between the drum sequencer and the LXR, the change in accent seems to happen after the trigger, and it applies to the next trigger. So if I have an accent on the first one, or the first step or note in the pattern, and not on this one, they'll actually play in verse. But it's not just as simple as them being backwards, because they cascade throughout the pattern and basically shift all of your accent changes by like 1 step. If I'm wrong about that, and somebody else has the same pair set up and is able to get those to play nice together, which you think they would, given, the big Ericsson's logos on both of them, I would love to be wrong. But in my experience, that's just how it is. So I almost never use the accents on these. I just kind of live with it. The out structure that I use for the LXR is out 1 is always my kick, which I patch into the first channel on the cockpit, which is expecting a tip ring sleeve cable. And so if you do this normally, you will only get that kick in your left ear. I've hacked open the input jack on that and ripped out the ring connector and then soldered across on the actual circuit board, the left to the right. So now this is a mono jack for me, which is exactly what I want there, because I just want my kick to be in it. And then I will do let's see, I think I do this way. Yeah. So I'll do a mono out from my kick into channel 1, another mono for the other pair of drums, typically like low toms or low secondary kicks, into channel 2. And then I believe I have the claps, maybe the snare, and definitely the hi-hats here on channel 3. One of the things that is really annoying about the LXR to me is that the output structure, so which drums are assigned to which outputs, is different across every preset, which I haven't done a ton of tuning and customization of my own kits in here yet. I've done a little bit, and I like what's possible there, but I like the immediacy of just being able to flip through something, grab something, tweak that, and then just save it for this particular use. And what was really, really annoying is if you're trying to surf through kits, the outputs change each time you apply a different one. And well, if I've got these all at different levels, or one of the things I often do here is use this for sidechain, which I'll set that up in just a little bit, that completely falls apart. And so I spent, half an hour combing through every single preset kit in here, the entire set of save slots, and changed the outputs structure for all 7 drums to align to how I use them. So now when I flip through the kits, or I'm adjusting things, I know the output structure is always the same, which feels like I think how it should be. Output should be a global setting, but they're not. I think it's probably because of the FX bus works in here, because you can route things through that and then to the output, but I digress. Behind the scenes, the cockpit automatically goes into the golden master I mentioned because of the little pin cable on the back. And then I will typically take out the golden master into the first input on each of the 100 grits. 100 grits do have 2 inputs, but they have they're not meant to be a stereo pair. They feedback against one another lovely. It's really fun to map two things into there. But if you want to run these in true stereo and use both the distortion outputs, you need to use two of them, which I've got a video about the experiment of getting that set up and how I've now stuck with it that I'll link up there. From the 100 grits, I will typically go into Nautilus, and then if I'm just using this case by itself, I'll just come out of the Nautilus right into that headphone jack. But I'm going to set this case up to record into the 4MS wave recorder of the other case, because that's how I do this. I don't run these cases into an audio interface. I just recorded the SD card there. So let me grab some different cables and then get my headphones out, and we'll be able to start to hear what we're doing as I kind of continue to evolve things. So here's a little stereo pair. One of the things that I typically use for just monitoring, because I don't have studio monitors here, I'm always on headphones, but I use the IIIs, and they've got this wireless transmitter that is like extremely low latency. It's really nice. So that usually sits just either here, if this is a case by itself, or at the other end of my A case, which I'll splice in some video to show that. Okay, now that that's patched up over there and I've got headphones on, we should have some sound. There we go, there's our 7 drums. We're on the Rotterdam kit. And right away, there's lots of places that gain staging comes into play with this case. So we've got this knob here in the cockpit that clearly adds some kind of drive. That I'll play with sometimes. The Golden Master has its own in-gain and out-gain or out-volume settings. The 200 grits are obviously incredibly gain focused and level focused, including the 100 times switch. Which adds a ton of noise. That's the other thing with this case that I just kind of have to accept is the noise level. I've got a couple questions of, hey, does the cockpit have a noise level to it or a kind of background noise? Golden Master had background noise is kind of the endorphins, common questions. I don't know. With this case, it's just not really an issue. With how much I'm doing after those modules, if they're an end of the chain thing for you, totally could see how that's a big deal. For me, I'm using them as kind of audio signal collectors and organizers before I actually go through this top row, I guess, effects and a chain. And that those impart so much noise and chaos that it's all gravy. All right, so let's do that. Select that trigger. Let's go to, there we go. I've got a bunch of stuff on here. All right. Right away, one of the first things that I'll do is bring these 100 grits to about noon, and then take one of the big benefits of Lapsus Os for this particular use as a macro controller, having 2 outs per channel. I can come over here. Oops, is that not plugged in all the way? There we go. And now with the Lapsus Os fader, I've got the cutoff on both 100 grits. Adding a little bit of Nautilus. Okay, so one of the things I mentioned earlier that I often do is not actually just patch the trigger from the drum sequencer, I almost said sample drum again, into the LXR, but I will take that and mult it first. Taking one copy and bringing it into the drum sequencer, and the other copy into maths to have a little envelope here. Then can take that envelope and bring it over into our kind of sidechain input for the cockpit, which is only really running, you can see this light blinking red every once in a while. There it goes. Only running on channel 4 by choice. So let's now bring in the Polygogo. So going backwards, we'll take the outs of channel 4, and I'm running out of my short cables, so we're gonna get lanky. Out of the filter, the in for the filter is going to come from the out of the VCA. The CV for that VCA is going to come from this first channel on maths. The envelope for that channel on maths is going to get triggered by the 8th channel on the sample drum. So if we go back to step play, there we go. Let's make that a little longer, a little bigger too. Cool. Bring that up. And now we just need to take those XY and bring them right there. Do I have short cables left? Yes, I do. All right. So I will trigger the Polygogo typically from the drum sequencer. Sometimes I do it from the Clank Chaos. That's kind of one of the things that toggles back and forth quite a lot. But if we set something up right now, oops, let's go to trigger select there and then just fill that pattern. Let's mute our kick drum, but we should have some sound. No, what's going on? Oh, I'm muted. There we go. So with that sidechain knob all the way down, you're hearing the constant 16th notes that I just put across the keypad here. But if I bring that sidechain amount impact up, no? Oh, I muted the kick drum. Way too high sidechain. Where is it? There we go. In this video, sorry, I keep forgetting what screen I'm on here because my mic is hiding this set of LEDs and buttons perfectly from my view, so I keep thinking that I'm on a screen that I'm not actually on. So now that's that sidechain happening. If I add the kick audio back in, then we've got, you know, your typical sidechain, which is a little frustrating how many cables it takes to get this set up right. The cockpit does have a handful of different ways to set up sidechaining. I believe you can put a trigger in here, you can put audio in here, or you can put CV. The only one that I think sounds good and consistent and controllable is CV. And so I guess one of the things I could do is adjust that envelope. bring in some other parts here. Now I've got an easy volume on the cockpit for that group that contains the cymbals, hi-hats. Now there's like nothing complicated at all about that pattern, but it already sounds really nice and like compacted together. You could take in a clay ball and just kind of smash it a couple times, which is great. So it's a little annoying the way the sidechain has to work. If there's anything about this case that I would love to overhaul and change, it's probably my mixing. But given everything else that I have going on in here and everything that I want to be able to do, don't really want to give up my 200 grids. I don't want to get a smaller oscillator. I really love the Polygogo. Maybe maths could be smaller, but it's also my only attenuation often because I have Lapsus doing a bunch of other stuff. So it works for what I need it to do. Sometimes it's annoying, but again, it still works. So let's talk about CV. We kind of have our audio signal set up. I've got one CV control of the filters here. One of the things that I will often do first in terms of CV is the morph setting. I wish this would save. Maybe it does save if you save the kit, but I will always crank the CV1 input on the LXR to 100 with morph, which is just thankfully the last setting list. So you can just kind of twist this until it's all the way there. And then on the perform page, you can pick, what you're morphing to and how much. So this first knob, those numbers are the other kit number. So let me grab another cable. We're going to take CVA from the crossfader, which, yes, I have upside down, mainly just so my hand can sit nicely here against the case, and do this without having cables in the way. So if we have our pattern going again, let's mute those. Trying to find a kit that I like. It's not doing what I think it's doing. Oh, did I have these backwards? Yeah, all right. Another lesson in me forgetting how I've got this set up. So this is your kit number on that one. Let's get something totally different. That's the morph amount. So there's the kit we were on. It gives you this really nice macro control over a ton of sound. That I think is really nice. I don't always patch it to the crossfader or X fade or whatever. The joystick is also a lot of fun, mainly because of the CV recording that you can do. So Let's leave that as is for now. We can easily swap the kit we're going to route to, but I think that is good. The other things that I feel like I always need are a dry wet control over the mix on the Nautilus and a control over the depth of the Nautilus. So if you're not familiar with Nautilus, it's a stereo delay. There's a whole bunch of these modes that they call chroma. It's really just a different effect that's put with like a single strength knob on this depth. In the first setting with this knob all the way left, it's basically a low pass filter over the delays. I think there's like 8 of the different settings. That's what controls the color behind the scenes there. So I just hit the clock button, so I might have just reclocked my delay. I can talk about that in a second. This way, I can take the whole thing underwater and back. Nice being able to have a separate control over the mute of the kick versus the sidechain trigger, because now we've got that sidechain happening, leaving room for our kick to come back in, and just waiting for me to tap that knob there. Oof. Don't like that. I don't like that sound anymore. Let's go back over here. I could tweak that, but that's not really the point of this this video. The last thing that I will often then do is use the joystick to map something strange. I didn't patch up the chaos. I guess we could do that now. Often I will patch it just to the, let's actually, instead of doing actual volt per oct and pitch and whatnot, let's just use it as a weird CV mover. So we can crank up the time. Let's crank the width back up. And do the same there. Now we're starting to get some real funkiness happening, even though we don't have these turned up very loud. Let's see what that sounds like. One of the reasons I like the Polygogo so much is just the clarity of the panel. The ability to attenuate the CV very easily in either direction. You can also attenuate the CV from the relative position of the fader, either up or down. It's extremely, extremely clear. That sounds pretty nice. Now if we add our hats back in, let's put the resolution of the Nautilus on channel 4, the x-axis. So now I can crank the speed of the delay. Just don't have anything on the Y. Let's put something on the Y. Sensors. Let's try sensors. Similar to my A case, the audio kind of has a consistent, fairly consistent path here, but the CV radically changes each time what's controlling what. Don't like how that's clipping so much. Let's maybe just add a little subtle. It's good. Let's get the 100 Gret's getting weird. Envelope a little shorter for the Polygogo. And then if we really want to get weird, we can do the 100 gain. So yeah, that's the B case. I think we talked about every module. Oh, we didn't talk about the USB light. Added these to both my cases. It's just power. Of course, you don't get the USB right the first time. So I can get a little light. These lights are cheap and often turn themselves off. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. You'll see this case a lot if you watch any more of my videos. You've maybe seen it before, but hopefully this was a more thorough walkthrough and made sense for how I use different parts of it and whatnot. So thanks for watching. Until next time. Peace.